Thank you, Suresh. Thank you for organizing this. Good morning, everyone. My name is Braille. For those of you who have not met me, I have benefited greatly from our previous mindfulness session conducted by Alison, our mystery guest, and am happy to introduce Stephen Howard, who is an award-winning author of 21 leadership, management, and professional development books. His most recent books are How Stress and Anxiety Impact Your Decision-Making and Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. How to go from mindful, 2 words, to mindful, 1 word, leadership. An American who resides in Southern California has called Asia Pacific home for more than 30 years, 21 years in Singapore and 12 years in Australia. He is also well known and recognized for his truly international and multicultural perspective. Based on the research he did for his book, Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes, he will share with us this morning more about building and maintaining your long-term brain health. Welcome home, Stephen.
And you got the permission to share your screen, Stephen, now.
Okay. There we go. So give me a thumbs up. Raymond, Brill, I can see you two on my screen. Can you see? You're very good. Thank you. So as Brill said, we're going to talk about building and maintaining your long-term brain health. I had this slide as my introduction. I think Brill hit all these points, except for I have trained over 10,000 leaders and coached and trained 10,000 leaders in the past 25 years. And in addition, I am a certified health coach. As Brill mentioned, I lived in Singapore for 21 years. I arrived on the 8th day of January, 1980. So it had lots of thoughts in it. So lots of good luck. So it was very, very auspicious and very, very beneficial for me living in Singapore that long. And then I moved to Australia, and I lived in Australia for 12 years before moving back to the United States about 7 years ago. And as Brill mentioned, what we're going to sorry, yes, yeah, you muted me. Okay, I'm unmuted now. Somebody muted me. James, told you I'm going to take it personally. Okay,
no,
so this
me.
is
go on.
Okay, Suresh, still going to take it personally. Anyway, what we're going to go through today is based on my book, Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes, which I published about almost 20 months ago. And this is based on the research I did for that book. And so, you know, what is it with our brains? You know, why do we get monkey brain and foggy brain, and why are we seeing in societies increased in dementia, increase in Alzheimer's, increase in stroke? It's simply because of this 24/7 lifestyle that we live. You know, we're under pressure, we're drowning in too much information. We can't get away from anything, and as a result, our brains are busy. Our brains are very busy. As a matter of fact, we have something like 50 to 70,000 thoughts every day. And adults, all of us on this call, we make about 45,000 remotely conscious decisions every day. Now, a lot of these, as it says, are remotely conscious. I mean, like which shoe do you put on first, your right shoe or your left shoe? You know, sort of thing. If you have shoes that you tie, let's say you put on your right shoe first, then you put on your left shoe. Do you then tie your left shoe and go back to the right shoe to tie it, or do you put the right shoe on and tie it, or then put the left shoe on and tie it? You know, we all have patterns. We are creatures of patterns, creatures of behaviors. We process about 400 billion bits of information per second. Our brain does, but we're only aware of about 2,000 of these. So there's so much information coming at us from so many angles, from so many communications, both verbal and nonverbal. And our brain is processing all this, but consciously, we're only aware of a very limited amount, about 2,000. And not surprisingly anymore, the average person checks their mobile device about 100 times a day. Yeah, that means if you're awake for 16 hours, you're checking it 6 times an hour, or roughly every 10 minutes on average. That's the average person. So, you know, we're just not giving our brains a break. And we do this because there's an urban acronym called FOMO, fear of missing out. And one of the things I'd like you to take away this morning from this is to change the definition of FOMO. FOMO really should mean fear of mind overload. because that's what we're doing to our brains. We are overloading our brains, overloading our minds with our current lifestyles. And this stress that we're putting on ourselves impacts our thinking. And stressed out people fall prey to what we call binary decision making. Binary meaning two. So when we get into a stress mode, we're looking for yes or no, black or white, A or B, yeah, do this, don't do this. We're looking for just two choices. We're narrowing our options down, or our brain is narrowing our options down for us to use to make decisions. And that's not good, because often we need multiple responses. Give you an example of that. Back in December last year, I was teaching a classroom in Fort Worth, Texas. And this is a 4-day leadership program, and normally we only allow 24 people into it. But that, because it was in the year, the client asked could they put 28 people in it. And I said, yeah, sure, I can do 28. Well, on Monday morning, start of a 4-day program, I had 38 people sitting in front of me, all eager, waiting to learn. And so at the coffee break, I left a voice message for my client. I said, I got 38 people, what's going on? And so she called me back at lunchtime, and something had broken down with their internal registration system. And all 38 people thought they were registered. And she only had 28 on her list. And she basically says, look, I can't afford 38 people. And you can't teach this class. It's too participatory, too detailed. Send those other 10 people home. So she was stressed. And she was, keep them or send them. Binary. And I said, whoa, slow down a second. Wait a second. First of all, understand that of those 10 people, 2 had flown in from Denver, 1 had flown in from Baton Rouge. This is the Fort Worth, Dallas area. 2 had driven down from Oklahoma City. 1 had driven down from Kansas, which was about an 8 or 9 hour drive. And 1 had flown up from Houston. So you had like 6 or 7 people out of the 10 who had, blocked off their week, had traveled, had hotel reservations. Some of them had flight reservations, which at that time, if you change your flight reservation in the US, you'd pay $250 for. I said, do you really want to kick these 10 people out? And she calmed down and she caught her breath. Said, okay. I said, look, I think I can handle this. I'm going to change some stuff in the class. I need you to agree with me. I'm going to change some of the exercises. This is what I've been thinking I'm going to do. If you approve it, I'll let the 10 people stay. And that's what we did. So I was not stressed. I was looking for better solutions. She was stressed and was in a binary decision-making mode. And funny enough, fortunately for them, we went ahead and did this because the COVID hit 2 months later. And there's no classroom training this year. And that company has already announced there'll be no classroom training in the first 6 months of next year. So those 10 people would not be trained until at the earliest, the second half of next year, and most likely year 2022, if they hadn't stayed in that class. So fortunately, we came to a better decision. But the reason we do this, the reason our brain goes into binary mode is we are wired to react under stress. That we are hardwired in our brain, and that comes from the old age, caveman era and, wild beasts and all that kind of stuff. And that's why, if a snake pops up in front of us, we react, or, if we see a car about to do, hit our car, we react and blow our horn or whatever. So we are wired to react under stress, but that's not good in the business world. And it's often not good in our personal lives. And that's what I want to share with you today. First thing I want to share with you, and this particularly for those of you who are millennials and Generation X, because you've been raised in a multitasking world. Let me tell you something, multitasking is not the answer. And the reason for this is that multitasking is detrimental to focus. First of all, the brain can only do one thing at a time. The brain physiologically can only have one thought at a time. So if you're doing 2 different things at a time, your brain is literally flicking back and forth like a light switch. It's detrimental to focus. Additionally, constantly switching between email and phone calls and other tasks, it prevents the brain from focusing and engaging in the deep problem-solving cognitive processing that we really need when we need to make a strategic decision or a big decision or an important decision. And all these constant notifications that we get from our computers, our smartphones, our tablets, they jolt our stress hormones into action. In fact, when your phone buzzes, and I'd like you to watch yourself the next time. Hopefully you've all got it on airplane mode now, but when your phone buzzes at you the next time or vibrates loudly, watch your physical reaction. It's what happens is that the same, cortisol goes into your body the same as if a snake had just hissed at you. You have these, you twitch, you jerk, you reach for, you quickly reach for that phone as fast as you can. That's the same stress hormones in action as if you're in danger. So as a result, these notifications are training our brains to be in a nearly constant or continuous state of stress and fear. And obviously for our long-term brain health, that is not good. And the inability to focus is one of the leading indicators of dementia. So we're going to have a societal problem in all societies around the world when the millennials start getting in their 60s and then Generation X gets in their 60s because they've spent most of their adult lives training their brains not to focus. And this is going to have their increasing their risk for Alzheimer's, for dementia, and for stroke. In addition, a Stanford University study revealed that regular multitasking makes it difficult for people to focus on a single task. In fact, their researchers concluded that multitasking results in goal irrelevant information to compete with goal relevant information in the brain. So here's what that means. When I'm writing my books, I usually write in 3 to 3.5 hour spurts. But I get up every 50 minutes or so to get a new bottle of water, or make a new cup of coffee or something like that. I used to, while the kettle was boiling, I used to check my phone and check email and check messages and, I 2-minute boils and quickly respond to some stuff. But then I found it hard to get back into my writing. So after I read this research, I now put my phone on airplane mode when I'm writing. And that way, even if I do, I've gotten out of the habit, but in the early days when I would still pick up my phone, I would say, oh, it's in airplane mode. Okay, put it down, Stephen, don't touch it. And what happens is while the kettle's boiling and I'm doing whatever I'm doing in my kitchen, my brain is still working on, it's still thinking about the writing. It's thinking about what the next chapter should be or what's the next paragraph. How do I segue from what I've just been writing to the next key point that I want to make? My brain is still working, because it doesn't have that goal irrelevant information like text messages and emails and things interfering with the thought process. So that's a good example of irrelevant information getting in the way of goal relevant information. In addition, and this surprised me, the Stanford research study showed that, and I expected the first point, that when people are daily multitasking, people are less effective when they're multitasking. And we know that. It's hard to concentrate. Even right now, if any of you are on your phone looking at an email, you're only catching about 40, 50, 60% of what I'm saying or what the slides are showing, because your brain is switching back and forth between whatever on your phone or your screen and the presentation. So when you're multitasking, you are less effective. But what surprised me is that people who do it on a daily, regular basis are also less effective when they're not multitasking. Because again, the brain is not being trained to focus. And they're less effective at prioritizing to achieve goals. So multitasking has a lot of risk to it. And you'll see here that when a person multitasks, they literally reduce their intelligence level as measured by the ability to comprehend and understand what they're seeing and what they're hearing. In fact, a study from York University in the UK show that multitaskers scored 11% lower on a standard comprehension test than those not multitasking. So it's a standard comprehension, read a paragraph or 2 paragraphs or something, and then ask questions or answer questions about it. 11% decline if they were multitasking. And I love this quote. And if not, this is the second thing I hope you come away with today. Whoops, there we go. Oh, sorry, quote's next. Multitasking diminishes the mental productivity. It elevates your brain fatigue. It's why you're more tired, and it increases stress. Here's the quote. Multitasking is as toxic to the brain as smoking is to the lungs. And this comes from Stanford Chapman, who's the founder and chief executive of the Center for Brain Health at the University of Texas in Dallas. You might think, wow, that doesn't make sense. How can somebody say that? If you go back to the 1930s and 1940s, there used to be advertising running that says doctors recommend this cigarette. Then in the 30s and 40s, doctors are recommending smoking to reduce stress. Well, how crazy is that today's world, less than 100 years later? So we're just learning. Scientists have had about the last 20 years or so with MRI technology to really study and understand the brain better than they've ever understood it before. And Stanford Chapman is absolutely correct. Multitasking is as toxic to the brain as smoking is to your lungs. So that's the second point I hope you take away from today's session. So let's talk about brain health. And here's some startling statistics. Now, I have to admit, all these are US-based statistics. And they're also pandemic statistics, which means that they're only going to increase because everyone going through the prolonged stress of uncertainty, of economic distress, of being in lockdown or shelter-in-place situations. So the current estimates call for a 67% increase in dementia, in Alzheimer's disease, and stroke by 2030. So within this decade, 67. That means 10 million people in the US and 76 million people worldwide by 2020 will be suffering from stroke, dementia, or Alzheimer's disease. And again, this is pre-pandemic. I guarantee you the numbers will increase the longer this pandemic continues. By 2030, treating these illnesses will be a US $1 trillion industry. So if you want to start making stock investments now for the long term, for your kids' college education or something, start investing in the pharmaceutical companies that are designing the drugs that will help people cope with dementia, Alzheimer's, and stroke. And again, I said cope with it. They cannot not design anything that's going to prevent it. Quite frankly, that wouldn't be as profitable. They're going to design drugs that help people cope with these illnesses. The American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association estimate that 60% of Americans will develop a brain disease in their lifetimes. And I made a commitment to myself. I'm not going to be part of the 60%. I want to be in the minority here. I want to be in the 40%. And this is the other aspect of it, and this is why I'm so passionate about this subject, because my father suffered from early Alzheimer's before he passed away about 4 years ago. And I was his parental caregiver. And right now, 10% of adults aged 60 to 69 are already parental caregivers of their elderly parents. Let me tell you something. Dealing with a parent suffering from Alzheimer's is emotionally and financially devastating. It is really, really tough. And so this is the kind of thing you don't want your children to have to go through. And if you can get this message to your parents now, it's not too late. They can do things, you'll see later in this presentation, do things to reduce their risks of Alzheimer's, dementia, and even stroke. Now, our brains are the most metabolically active organ in our bodies. They use about 10% of or 10 times the amount of fuel as any other part of the body. So it's really important that we understand how to feed our brains and feed our brains properly. Our brains also change more than any part of our body. I remember when I was in high school, many, many years ago, I was taught in my biology class that our brain stopped growing roughly at age 25. And that's what people believe. You know, I won't tell you what year I was in high school, but probably before some of you were born. But that's what people believed back then. Scientists know that's no longer true. What's known as neuroplasticity, our brains continue to develop new brain cells well into our 70s, probably into our 80s and 90s as well. There just haven't been enough 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds around to test, but we're going to get there. But our brains continue to grow well into our 70s through neuroplasticity if we take care of our health, if we take care of our brains. The health of our brain is a vital factor in keeping dementia and a range of brain-related diseases at bay. We can't prevent. Somebody asked me the other day, can we prevent Alzheimer's? Probably not. I mean, some people will never get Alzheimer's. Some people have a DNA component, which increases their risk for Alzheimer's. But most people, even without that DNA component, and I'll show you some statistics in a moment, if you don't take care of your health, you're increasing your risk for Alzheimer's and dementia. And at least, if nothing else, we can postpone it and we can reduce our risk for it. But if you fail to ensure the proper health of your brain, if you don't give it adequate essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and oxygen, then your brain's going to have poor health. And one of the reasons for this, as I mentioned, the brain is the biggest user of oxygen in our body. It's also the biggest user of blood in our body. So anything that slows down the flow of oxygen So damage to our lungs from smoking or other things, or damage to our blood vessels through high cholesterol, through artery diseases, through heart muscle diseases. All those that slow down the flow of blood to our brain is going to increase our risk for Alzheimer's, dementia, and stroke. So brain health really is a lifetime pursuit. Now, I did say our brain continues to grow. It also does age, like all parts of our body. And so to some extent, brain aging is inevitable. How fast your brain ages, though, is up to you. General physical changes that occur during normal brain aging include things like our brain mass will reduce, our cortical density will thin, our white matter shrinks, and that slows our processing and our cognitive functions. And the little neurotransmitter systems generate less chemical messages, and that slows down the speed at which we think and at which those messages are transmitted across our brain. Most importantly, obesity in midlife accelerates our brain aging by approximately 10 years. So that means if you look at two people, 60 years old, say 62 years old, and they have similar lifestyles, but one is obese. One is heavily overweight compared to the one who is not. The one who is heavily overweight, they will have a brain that is effectively 72 years old. It will have aged by 10 years. And so that means that what we mean by that, that person will have, their brain mass will have reduced greater. Their cortical density will have thinned more. Their white matter will have shrinked more. They will have slower processing and cognitive functions, and their neurotransmitter systems will generate less chemical message, and basically their brains will be operating like a 72-year-old. Sugar, soft drinks, and even diet sodas. So don't go to these Coke Zero things and diet sodas and everything else. They're all connected now with speeding up our brain aging. They're connected with having smaller overall brain volume, with poor episodic memory, and a shrunken hippocampus. So, you know, I took sugar out. I used to, you see me sipping my coffee here. I used to, my typical coffee 3 years ago before I did this research was 1 spoonful of instant coffee and 1 spoonful of sugar. Today, I do not put any sugar in my coffee, and I've been like that for over 2 years. It took me about 6 months to wean myself completely off putting sugar in my coffee. And I also did the same thing. I took all the Cokes out of my refrigerator, all the Coke Zeros, and maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, I'll treat myself to Coke because I do enjoy the taste, particularly on a hot day. But I don't drink the 3 or 4 cans of Coke a day like I used to. So continue with the bad news here, and sorry for that on a Saturday morning. Lack of regular mental stimulation contributes to our retirement-related cognitive decline. And as mentioned earlier, 60% of Americans will develop a brain disease in their lifetime. 60%. We've got over 300-something million people in this country here in the United States. 60% of that's 180 million people will have some element of brain disease sometime in their life. The aging brain, though, is a lifestyle choice, and here's why. Higher levels of abdominal fat in old age is directly correlated with the reduction in cognitive function. So it's never too late to get, if somebody has, somebody in your family, somebody you know, a friend, a colleague has high abdominal fat, give them this message, tell them it's never too late to start reducing that to whatever degree they can. Now, for you men out there, those of you who pack on the most abdominal fat by your 40s, you are the most likely to develop dementia later in your lives. I wish I'd known this when I was in my 30s. And this is because fat cells, which obviously what abdominal fat's all about, fat cells increase inflammation throughout the body and the brain. So if we get more fat cells in our brain, again, that's reducing the flow of oxygen to our brain cells, and that's reducing the flow of adequate blood to our brain cells. And that's increasing our risk for all these brain diseases, all these brain illnesses. And also, and scientists now can measure this, people with too much belly fat, they actually do have smaller brains than somebody the same age, the same weight, the same height as somebody who doesn't have as much belly fat. Again, that abdominal fat reduces the neuroplasticity in your brain. It reduces the brain's ability to create new brain cells and for the brain to continue to grow. So let's talk about long-term brain health. And as you see here, it is a lifetime pursuit. The unhealthy habits we have in our young adult years and our middle life, these create the prime candidates for dementia in our 60s and 70s. And it's the culprits that you know about that has to do with weight. Junk food, fast food, obesity, sitting too much, lack of physical exercise, sitting too long in meetings and on phone calls. By the way, a research study at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, has shown that sitting too much, having a very sedentary lifestyle, also thins the brain over time. The brain does not grow if you're sitting around too much. So for instance, as a facilitator, I know most of your coaches, but if you're also facilitating, when you get back into classroom facilitation, I no longer let my participants in the class sit for more than 50 minutes at a time. I make sure that at least every 50 minutes we get up, we go to whiteboards or flip charts, or we do some kind of a group exercise. You know, no longer are they going to sit for 2.5 hours, take a coffee break for 15 minutes, come back for 2 hours, go to lunch, sit down, you know, go back to class, sit down, have one coffee break in the afternoon. No more. You got to get people up and moving. You got to get yourself up and moving. If you've got children who like to sit around on games on whatever devices that they're playing these days, encourage them, get them to get up and move around at least once an hour, just for 5 minutes or so. And it's not too late to start on a path to healthy brain health, whatever age you are. It's never too late. You can always do something. Some other risk factors, and this particularly when people get in their retirement, they lack of regular mental stimulation will speed up memory loss. And watching television, been watching Netflix, been watching movies is not mental stimulation at all. Sitting too long, as I mentioned, or too much results in brain thinning. Fatigue, when you're tired, disrupts the speed at which brain cells communicate. And here's some research that shocked the heck out of me. Because remember, I lived in Singapore, as I said, for 20 plus years, 21 years. And I used to fly back to the United States 2 or 3 times a year. And for those who've done that, you know what a long flight that is. Just from Singapore, you know, stop in Tokyo, land somewhere in the West Coast, get off the plane. You're tired. I don't sleep on planes. So by the time I landed in Los Angeles, or if I flew on to Dallas, I could be up for 36, 40 hours with very little sleep. And then I'd rent a car and drive 2 hours to my parents' house, or to, if I was going to a hotel for a client meeting, whatever it was. Here's the research that scares me. When we have been awake for 17 hours, our brain is operating at the effective blood alcohol content of 0.05, which is the legal limit for drunk driving in places like Australia and Europe. Now, in the United States, it's 0.08, but that's after 17 hours. When we've been awake for 24 hours or longer, our brain is effectively operating as if we had a blood alcohol content of 0.10, which means we would be legally drunk in every country around the world. So no longer will I stay up 24, 30, 36 hours and then jump and run a car. No way. From now on, and I've started doing this now, when I made 2 trips to Asia since this research has come out. I come back, if I have to, I get a hotel at the airport and I sleep for 6 or 8 hours, and then I get a rental car and drive. No more driving after being awake that long. And that's why here in the United States, tired driving, tiredness when you're driving is the first or second cause every year of automobile accidents. It's not drunk driving, it's tired driving. So our risk factors for dementia, not surprisingly, smoking, having a BMI, a body mass index over 25, not exercising regularly. And look, no one's saying you have to go out and run marathons or half marathons. You know, a 20-minute walk 4 or 5 times a week at a minimum is all you really need to just get that blood flowing and start protect your brain. Do it for more often, you're in better shape. Not eating fish twice a week, not eating fruit or vegetables, having high blood pressure, having high cholesterol or high blood sugar. These are all critical risks for dementia. And that's why some scientists today, and even some doctors, are now referring to Alzheimer's as diabetes type 3. Because effectively, as you see, it's a lifestyle disease and it's caused by the same factors that cause diabetes. Now, some good news, so you don't kill me or you don't leave. Healthy lifestyle changes can have far-reaching effects on long-term brain health, including your ability to cope with diseases and with age-related decline. Research shows that people who experience the least decline in cognitive functions and least decline in memory all share these characteristics. And not surprisingly, they are the opposite of what you just saw in the previous slide. They partake in physical activity. They pursue intellectually stimulating activities. And I'm sorry, guys, but watching Big Brother is not intellectually stimulating. Okay, or whatever other or whatever these other reality TV shows are. And by the way, watching cable news is not intellectually stimulating. Matter of fact, I highly recommend you don't watch any cable news of any channel, of any political persuasion whatsoever. Just it will lower your blood pressure, I guarantee you. So get rid of cable news as well. They stay socially active. They manage their stress by not watching cable news. They eat healthy and they sleep well. And the reason sleep is important, and we all have different sleep habits and what works best for you. But sleep is important because sleep restores the synapses connections in our brain. So when we're sleeping, our brain is actually rebuilding itself. It's rebuilding those synapses that crack because of the stress levels that we're in. Now, how much sleep you need is really up to you. Most science research says 7 to 9 hours, but we're all different. For years, I personally have operated in 5.5 hours sleep every night. And then about once a month, I get a 10 or 12 hour sleep. I just kind of crash it, lay down on a Saturday night and wake up late on a Saturday or Sunday morning or something like that, just once a month. But we're all different. So know yourself and make sure you're not cheating yourself out of sleep. I have shared with Suresh and Brill an article I read a couple of days ago that showed Singapore is one of the most sleep-deprived nations in the world. But the good news is, and you guys can all pat yourselves on the back, that since your pandemic lockdowns, Singaporeans in general have been taking better care of themselves, practicing better health care for themselves and getting more sleep. So I guess there is some silver lining out of this pandemic after all. Now, all those factors, I'll go back to them: physical activity, intellectual stimulating activities, socially active, managing your stress, eating healthy, sleeping well. They are all interconnected. There is I can't tell you which one do I do. If I only had to pick one, what would you do? No, they're all interrelated. On the other hand, excessive weight is a negative factor for each one of those. If you're overweight, you don't sleep very well. If you're overweight, you don't eat very well. If you're overweight, you tend to have higher stress, blah, blah, blah. So again, obesity is a key negative factor for all those healthy characteristics that you need to do. Now, can't have a presentation with Singaporeans without talking about food, right? I mean, that's, we got to talk about food if we're going to talk with Singaporeans. All right. I say that with a deep amount of respect because, man, I missed the pepper crabs out on the East Coast. So I can't wait to get back, as well as 𝑘𝐤𝑡 and duck rice. And we can argue about where the best duck rice is. I know. I preferred the one on Bendemeer Road, but we can all argue about that. Anyway, the Mediterranean-style eating practices have been shown to lower the risk for dementia by 30 to 35%. And a lady in Chicago, about 4, maybe 5 years, created a thing she calls the MIND diet, M-I-N-D, and it combines the Mediterranean diet with the old DASH diet, the dietary approach to stop hypertension that was created in 1997 by the American Heart Association and the American Institute of Health. And early studies, and it's only early, like I said, it's only been 4 or 5 years, but it is showing a 35% reduction in the risk for Alzheimer's disease. So combining the Mediterranean with the DASH diet, of course, the DASH diet means very low sodium intake or almost no sodium intake and very little of the solid carbohydrates. So research what works for you. Whoops, sorry guys, I really did not mean to do that. I'm not sure I can go back. Let me see if I can go back. Yeah, okay. High-fi, now you've researched for yourself, figure out what works best for you, but mostly just start eating, be as healthy in your eating habits as possible. And high-fat diets like this keto diet, and again, I'm not an expert, I'm not a neuroscientist, but from what I've read in my research, those kind of diets, they may, the key word is may, impair the brain's ability to detect the hormone leptin, which signals us to stop eating. So the very high-fat diet, if that's your preferred style, just be aware of it. I'm not saying it's bad, but be aware of it. It may impact the hormone leptin, and it may cause you to overeat because your body's not telling you that you're full, and just be cognizant of that fact. And again, talk to your own medical doctors, medical experts, and just monitor yourself. Know what works for you. I'm not recommending anything. I'm just sharing with you what I've come across in my research. Now, the other really, really good news, lifestyle changes work. And I can testify to that. When I first started, when my father passed away, I had started doing this research to understand how I could be a better caregiver for him. And after he passed away, I started thinking, well, look, I live alone. You know, I'm not in my youth anymore. What happens to me? My kids don't live anywhere near me. What's going to happen to me? Who's going to look after me? Well, I better look after me. So I've lost 30 pounds in the last 2 years, just through exercise and diet and doing what I'm telling you guys here. And I've reduced my blood pressure. And reducing the systolic blood pressure, that's the top number, to below 120, it results in a 19% reduction in new cases of MCI, what's known as mild cognitive impairment, and a 15% reduction in MCI combined with dementia. Walking and thinking outdoors can lead to a 75% uptick in creative ideation. So when you're stuck for a solution, you're struggling with some decision you have to make, you're not quite sure what to do or which direction to go in, go outside and walk. I know it's hot and humid in Singapore, but you're used to it. Go outside and walk, get some fresh air, go to one of the green parks and get a little bit of Mother Nature. And your brain will re-energize and you'll start being more creative. You'll find more creative solutions. At least you've got a 75% increase chance of that happening. Older people, and in this study, it was defined as 65 plus, who exercise roughly 40 minutes 3 times a week, show a significant cognitive advantage compared to those who don't. And quality sleep, as I mentioned earlier, builds up that synaptic connectivity in our brains, which is important. So, and it's quality sleep. It's not just the amount of sleep you get. And that may be one reason I can go on 5.5 hours, because I get solid sleep. I don't get waking up. I don't get disturbed. I get into a very deep 5.5 hour sleep and I'm refreshed. So again, we're all different. Know what works for you, but get quality sleep. It's not so much how much sleep you get, how much quality sleep are you getting. So the 7 steps for a healthier brain: manage your blood pressure, control your cholesterol, keep your blood sugar normal, get physically active. If you're already physically active, maintain that, increase it if you can. Eat as healthy of a diet as you can that you desire in your lifestyle. Lose as much extra weight as you can, and quit, or even better, never start smoking. Not surprisingly, these 7 steps are also known to help prevent heart disease and stroke. But again, as I said, the brain's the biggest user of blood and the heart's pumping that blood out. So what's good for the brain is good for the heart, or what's good for the heart is good for the brain. It's a two-way street. So some basic physical health guidelines: get your BP below 135/85, get your BMI to 25 or as near to 25 as you can, below it if you can. 20-25 minutes of some kind of aerobic activity: walking, jogging, tennis, treadmill, rowing machines, whatever it is, 4 times a week. Do a little bit of strength exercise when you can, 2-3 times a week. You don't have to be a bodybuilder, just some lightweight exercise. Eat healthy, and most importantly, have your annual physical checkup, particularly once you pass your 40s. See your doctor, do your blood work, have it monitored, talk to your doctor about what you should be doing and follow your doctor's advice. There's an old Irish proverb that says, no time for your health today, no health for your time tomorrow. So, you know, if you have the excuse, I don't have time to do that, I don't have time to exercise 20 minutes, you know, well, it's your choice. But if you can find the time, and I guarantee if you're watching the news every night, or if you're spending 20 minutes every day reading the Straits Times, read the Straits Times every other day. I guarantee you won't be any less knowledgeable. The news cycle repeats itself constantly. You don't have to read it every day. You don't have to watch the news every night to know what's happening in the world, what's happening in Singapore, what's happening in Asia. Every other day, every third day is probably sufficient. I've modified this little saying, no time for your health today, no health for your time tomorrow. So what I like to tell people is no time for your brain health today, no brain health for your time tomorrow. So it is a lifestyle. You have to get after it no matter what age you are, and think about how you're going to build and maintain your long-term brain health. You know, one of the things I loved living in Asia is collecting Asian quotes. And there's a Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And the second best time is now. And I thoroughly believe that. But again, I've revised that slightly. The best time to start planning your long-term brain health is in your 30s and your 40s. The second best time is now. Doesn't matter what age you are. Now, today, September the 12th, 2020. It is a lifetime pursuit. It is never too late to start on to healthy brain health. I hope it's a message that you take to heart. I hope as coaches, it's a message that you can spread to the people that you're coaching, whether you're coaching professionally or personally. It doesn't matter. This is a message that we need to cascade. It's important for our societies. It's important that the world that we leave to our children and our grandchildren will be a healthier world. And so it's never too late for anyone to start on that path to healthier brain health. I wish I'd known more about this. I cared for my dad for about 4.5 years before he passed, almost 5. And I let him dictate. I couldn't get my dad to walk. Man, I wish I'd known more about this stuff then, because I would have forced my dad to walk. He would have lived longer and his brain would have been sharper. And it's a shame, because my dad was also a writer. My dad published 20 novels. My dad published something like 200 short stories, and he was a highly recognized short story writer here in America. And his brain deteriorated. It was sad to watch. It really was. So with that, good. I said 45 minutes. I think that was pretty close to 45 minutes. So I open up for questions, and but don't leave, because I've got a little gift for everybody at the end, sort of an incentive to keep you here. So if you can stay, open up for questions. So Suresh, I'll let you moderate the questions. I haven't looked at the chat box, I have to admit, so I don't know if there's anything in the chat box.
Stephen, thanks. That's a wonderful presentation. And I must applaud the 30 people or 29 people. I'm kind of letting off Allison from the list. They have been very attentive. Probably your multitasking slide that kicked in the first few minutes really helped.
Good.
No questions in the chat, because everybody were single tasking, looking at you and looking at your presentation. So that's the first and foremost thing I wanted to share. So coaches, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. All your lines probably are muted. So if you have any questions, unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Can I ask a question? I'm Elaine here. Thanks on, Elaine. For giving us this presentation, which is very informative. I understand that you did mention that oxygen is good for the brain, right? What about certain health supplement like ORAC? We call it ORAC actually stands for oxygen radical absorbent capacity. Does it actually helps to prevent Alzheimer diseases? Or even dementia?
None of the research yet, none of the sciences have been able to link a connection to any supplement, quite honestly, to reduction of Alzheimer or any pill. Now, there have been some recent studies where there have been some, one pill that reduces cholesterol. They are seeing some indications of reducing the risk for Alzheimer's, but it's still too early to tell. The other research I can share with you related to that question, Elaine, is people often ask, what about apps? What about these you see these ads on the internet or maybe late at night on TV about, get this app. It'll, people spend 20 minutes on this game, increase their brain over. No, all that does is get you good at that game. If you do Sudoku for 20 minutes every day, after a month, you're really good at Sudoku. But here's the key to the brain. The brain likes newness. So for instance, one thing when I'm coaching somebody one-on-one, I tell them, mix it up. Most people drive the same route to work every day back in the day when we were going to their offices, right? Or, you walk the same way to the MRT station or to your bus stop. Change it up. If you're driving, go 2 blocks to the right and go parallel. And if it takes you 10 more minutes, plan for that. Because then your brain will, oh, wow. Oh, there's a new apartment complex over here. Oh, there's a restaurant over here. Oh, wow, look at how the trees are blooming over here. The brain will notice these new things. So Sudoku for a month is good. Then go to crossword puzzles for a month. Then go to jigsaw puzzles. Learn a language. Learn to play an instrument. The brain likes new stuff. But unfortunately, Elaine, to date, there's been no research in the US, the UK, Australia, Singapore, anywhere else in the world that has really proven that any supplements, whether it's traditional vitamin E's or vitamin D's or vitamin C's or any of these new age type things that these supplement companies are selling through their multi-channel marketing efforts, there's been no independent scientific proof of any of those improving the brain or reducing your risk that I know of. If somebody knows of something, please share it with me, but nothing in my research have I come across.
Okay, but they claim that they have very high antioxidants,
Sure.
Elements that actually helps them to renew the cell, to keep them, in a way that renewing the cell that is actually better. The brain will not be dead easily.
Yeah, and they can get away with proving that, at least here in the United States. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, does not regulate supplements. It only regulates prescription drugs, unfortunately. And so they get away with that kind of stuff. 𝐶𝐿, I'll come back to you in a moment. But again, I personally have not seen any research proving that. I mean, they all have their own internal scientists do it. But in honesty, it's kind of like the 1930s when the cigarette companies would pay doctors to recommend smoking as a stress reduction. And, I can't confirm anything that they're saying. 𝐶𝐿, I think you had your hand up. I think you're muted, sir. You're muted.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Elaine.
Sorry, I wasn't raising my hand. Was adjusting my light.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Stephen,
go Palana has a question, I think.
Yeah, not a question, but a query. In a sense, that I was quite amused with the statement that multitasking, what multitasking does really over a long period of time. It was quite a revelation, because over the last 30 years, multitasking was the thing that everybody was into. And there was this thing about women are better at multitasking than men because we are wired differently. And that kind of like, does that mean anything? Because men have always been very clinical and could only basically do one thing at a time. And we always get scolded for not being able to multitask, unlike women.
Absolutely true. And the one thing we do at a time,
with all due respect.
And the one thing we do at a time, we don't do it right unless they're telling us exactly how to do it.
and somehow women make better leaders, as it has been proven many times over.
That rabbit hole I'll go down through. I do agree with that statement in today's world, quite frankly. The other one, I'm not too sure I want to go down that rabbit hole. But when we talk about multitasking, I'm talking really about cognitive multitasking, trying to like, and particularly when you need to work on something strategic. Look, we can all eat and watch TV or movie on TV and keep track of the plot. However, you will notice that sometimes when you're eating, and if you really start to focus on what you're eating, you don't pick up all the dialogue. And I bet you most of you say, you have to sometimes stop it and reverse it, because what did they say? What happened there? Because so even something simple as that. Now, yeah, it's not functional multitasking. Look, I can boil a kettle and empty my dishwasher at the same time. That is multitasking, but it's not cognitive multitasking, okay, if you see the difference here. Yeah. So really what we're talking about here is really more cognitive. Yeah, most of us can do 2 or 3 things at one time if they're simple and routine sort of thing. But when it comes to thinking or listening, even more important, particularly for leaders, if leaders are not listening and you know, Gopal, you're asking me a question, or Gopal, you're asking me a question, and I'm like looking over here, looking at my notes or something, I'm not going to pick up 100% of what you said. There's no way if I'm concentrating on my notes. And that's the cognitive multitasking that doesn't work.
Excellent.
Does that help?
Yes, yes.
𝘠𝐿 definitely has his hand up because I see 5 fingers there. So go ahead, sir. And you are muted still. There you go.
Got it. Hey, Stephen, are you able to comment a bit on memory, short-term memory and long-term memory as the brain age, and what can we do about it?
They both age simultaneously. The short-term memory, it probably fails earlier than long-term memory, particularly in cases of the Alzheimer's. I can tell you, like in my father's case, let me tell you something. If I asked my father who won the boxing match at Chicago Stadium in 1954, he would tell me not only who won, but in what round. He was a big boxing fan. But I used to take my dad to the doctor's appointment, and every month we'd drive past this complex being built. And every month my dad would say something, wow, that's really coming along well. He did that for 2 years. It was fully built and open and occupied. And he would still say, oh, wow, that's coming along well. I wonder when it'll open. You know, and even though I had told him twice before. And one of the things about Alzheimer's I learned, you don't correct people. You just kind of go, yes, Dad. You know, you don't tell him that he's dumb or I told you that 3 times, Dad. It's open. You just kind of, you go with it because you have to understand it. That part of their brain is not functioning. It's much like, by the way, teenagers. The amygdala, which is at the back of our brain, develops first. And the prefrontal cortex at the front of our brain, which is the rational control center, the amygdala controls our emotions. The prefrontal cortex develops last. And that's why teenagers make very bad decisions. They're emotional. The rational part of their brain is not fully developed. Well, and here's something you can tell the people you're coaching. When you get stressed, when you get emotionally hijacked, and you've all said, I'm sure at some point, I was so angry I couldn't think straight, right? You've all said that. And you're right, you couldn't think straight. At that moment, you're emotionally hijacked. Your brain is effectively a teenage brain. Now, how many people want their companies to be run by people making decisions with teenage brains? How many of you want to run your life? How many of you want to make important decisions with a brain that's effectively a teenage brain? But that's what happens when you get stressed. That's what happens when you get emotionally out of control. You're effectively going back to being 16, 17 years old and making the kind of decisions a 17-year-old would make. So I haven't gone into that. Look, I'm not a neuroscientist, 𝘠𝐿. I haven't gone in depth into that. I'm sure if you do a Google search, you could find a better answer to that question. But my understanding is that the brain pretty much ages across all parts of it, except what's called the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex. It's the part of our brain that helps us regulate our emotions. It helps regulate the amygdala. It actually degenerates under prolonged stress. So what we're all going through right now with these long 6 months, 5, 6, 7 month lockdown periods, this is why we are seeing increased binge eating, reports of increased alcohol abuse, and increased domestic violence. Because people can't control, the brains are melting. Literally, that part of the brain is shrinking. So that part of the brain is actually degenerating through prolonged stress. The prolonged stress actually stops that part of the brain from regenerating cells. So prolonged stress, it's the ACC. And what I predict is going to happen, unfortunately, is that when people come back into the workplace, they're going to bring all this pent-up stress with them. And I think leaders need to know, first of all, how to manage themselves, but also how to manage their people and be on the lookout for their people having emotional meltdowns. And those emotional meltdowns can be anything from crying to yelling and screaming, or physical threats to another coworker. And I think we have set ourselves up across the world, across society. We got to be very careful about what people are going to bring back into the workplace. Sorry, I can't answer that in more depth for you, but that's just not my area of what I looked at.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thelsa?
Yes, this is Tekla. Hi, Steve.
Tekla, sorry, apologize for that.
No worries. My mom always challenges me when she says, playing mahjong is stimulating, mentally stimulating, and I've seen that effect because she gets really bored and tired. But once she plays mahjong, her mind is really fresh. I would love to hear your opinion. Is that one that you consider?
Definitely. Also, I think also because of the societal aspect of that, because she's playing with other people and probably mostly the same people, but probably occasionally with other people. But one of the things about being socially active, if you're socially active outside your family, is very important. Because when we all socialize with our families, we talk about our other relatives, we talk about what Uncle Joe's done, or Uncle Tom's done, or something like that. Auntie this, and it's really gossip. It's not stimulating. But when you're socializing with other people, what do you talk about? You talk about current events, you talk about politics, you talk about sports, you talk about movies, you argue things. It's more intellectually stimulating, typically, for all of us when we're talking with our friends than for most people when they're talking with their family members. So I would suggest in your mom's case, I think it is intellectually stimulating, particularly if she's bored. It's a good outlet for her. Highly bring it, but also the social aspect of it, I think, is very, very important.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Melinda has a question, Stephen. Just
okay,
let me
thank you. Okay.
Hi, Stephen. The session is awesome. Thanks, Melinda. Besides taking prevention, is there a way to check our brain health?
You can do some cognitive tests. I would talk to your doctor first, your physician, your GP, first about it, and see what they have, resources they have. But yeah, you can do, there's various tests you can do, online tests, memory tests, but you'll know yourself, quite frankly. And and don't ever worry about you misplace your keys. Everybody misplaces their keys. Everyone forgets something at some point.
I got scolded yesterday from
I would the other thing I would highly recommend you do is stop the negative chit chat in your head. I said this to a couple of people the other day. So, I said to them, all of us, when we leave our house and we get in our cars, we drive a couple blocks, or we walk down the street to the MRT station or something, and then we go, I forgot something, and boom. And we go, Stephen, you're so stupid, and you go back to your house, and for however long it takes you to go back to your house, you're telling yourself how stupid you are, how dumb you are, how you always forget things. That just puts you in a negative spiral. Well, that's no good. Here's what I suggest you do. Next time you do that, I forgot something. Go, congratulations, Stephen, you remembered. Better you remembered now than 2 miles down the road. Well done. Go back and get the keys or the briefcase or the report paper or whatever it is, your lunch, whatever you happen to forget, and congratulate yourself for remembering at that point in time. And it just will change your whole attitude about yourself, because we all make mistakes. We all forget things, we all, sort of thing. But it's the negative self-talk that helps, puts us in these downward spirals. But to check our brain health, no, it's just a matter of focusing on being healthy. You'll know when you're having, if you're getting mentally tired more often than the past, that's a checkpoint. It's kind of check the negatives. If you start to forget things, if you on a really regular basis, if you start to wake up in the middle of the night with thoughts that you can't control, those are all negative things. And then go see your GP, see your physician, and talk about that, and then see what steps you should be taking. It's kind of like, it's similar to your physical health. If you know you can't walk up 3 flights of stairs, you know you're unhealthy. But is there a test that says I'm only fit if I can walk up 5 flights? No, you know, it's kind of proving the negative. You know, when you're unhealthy, it's hard to tell you exactly when you're healthy.
If there are no other questions, probably, oh, sorry. Yes, Krasi, go on. You're on mute, Krasi.
Unmute. Okay. Thank you, Suresh. Stephen, I have 2 questions. One is I'd like to know about the research done. What was the age group? Were there groups? And how were the findings across the ages? I'm asking this question because I'm wondering if this is something that is more significant when you have an aging brain or a stressed brain. How about healthy brains? How do they function with multitask? That's one question.
Okay.
Sorry. And the second question is, you know, we talk about neuroplasticity and we talk about synapses getting excited when they have new experiences. How does that compare with multitasking? Because multitasking is something that, you know, makes a brain think different things at different times along the day. So I'm curious about the relationship between neuroplasticity and multitasking and routine. Thank you.
Multitasking does not increase your neuroplasticity. Multitasking basically tires your brain out. It overheats your brain, kind of like a car overheating. You got to, and you have to cool it off effectively. So because it's using up your short-term memory and your working memory is what it's doing when you're multitasking. Okay. So it does not help. It does not relate to neuroplasticity at all. In terms of health, the research that I went through, and I didn't want to bore you with a lot of data today. I mean, the research in those slides comes from many, many studies. The best way to learn it is go by the book. But in honesty, most of the studies were done on people, depends. Some were 60 plus, some were 65 plus, different age groups. Some were in the UK. I mean, the studies there that I referred to were in the UK, the University of Bordeaux in France, UCLA, Stanford University, University of Texas, Dallas, MIT. There's a bunch of research in there in those slides, basically. So I just kind of scattered them. But interestingly, and I'm pausing, and I want to paraphrase this, but there was a study done by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the only reason I know that is where this one well-known research scientist is at. And what they did is they actually studied the brains of Buddhist monks who were big meditators, and they looked at their brains, and both in a meditative state and a non-meditative state. And some really fascinating findings came out of that, particularly the way that those who were heavy meditators did not get stressed and would not react. What they did is they showed them pictures, very grotesque pictures of people, killed in bombings and, people burned through fires and stuff like that. And those who were heavy meditators, their stress did not jump. They were just able to look at that non-judgmentally, look at it and not get, what we might call grossed out or sick about it or whatever, compared to the normal person who would look at those photos and get all shaken up by it because, they were not very nice photographs. But it was a very fascinating study. So there is a lot of research being done relating to mindfulness and mental wellness, long-term mental wellness, and basically that ability to reduce your stress and keep the brain in a calmer state, quite frankly. You're muted again, dear. You're muted again, my friend.
Thank you, Stephen. My curiosity is in terms of the comparative age group. You mentioned 60 and 65. I'm just wondering if it's a younger group, how does multitasking work for them as opposed to the aging population?
It worked. I mean, okay, I did, funny enough, I took that one slide out. I think it was that same Stanford research one. And what it showed is that 97% of the population cannot 97.5% of the population cannot effectively multitask. Now, there was a group about 2.5%, and they called them super taskers. And of course, everyone thinks they're in that 2.5% category because we all think we can multitask very well. But chances are, most of us are in that 97.5% who can't do it. And so, yes, there are some people who could, and they don't know why yet. There's still more research being done on that, of why they're capable of doing that without overloading their brains, and you know, trying to figure out, you know, whether it's a genetic thing, is it a dietary thing, is it a mindfulness thing? They don't know yet. But that research showed that, you know, 97.5% of us cannot multitask, and that's why their conclusion was we are less efficient even when we multitask. We're less efficient when we don't multitask, and if we're huge multitaskers, we have a difficulty in setting priorities, priorities to achieve goals. We can't focus. Thank you, Karasi.
Thank you.
I was almost going to ask something with respect to multitasking. With Karasi's question and your response, Stephen, those were covered as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Coaches, any other questions? Well, on the chat, there were no questions, but a lot of people found pretty good value. Stephen,
Okay.
they've been thanking you. So just want to call that out.
All right, appreciate it. Let me, Suresh, if I can interrupt you for a second. Let me, if I gotta move this again. I want to give everyone a little gift here at the end, if they're interested. So that's a book. I'm very proud of it. It's won a couple awards. Those are my contact details. Suresh and Brill can certainly give that to you. If you want to reach out, have a conversation about this stuff, I'm happy to do so. But I want to say thank you. I have a free copy of my book, Great Leadership Words of Wisdom. It's a PDF copy. It has over 1,000 quotations on leadership from global business leaders, statesmen, athletes, coaches, philosophers, Chinese sages. So this is the website, leadership-quotes.com. All you have to do is put in your email address, and then you'll get an email with a link to download the book for free. So if you like quotes, particularly leadership quotes, if that can help you in your coaching practice, feel free to get a free copy of that. So I just want to say thank you. So sorry, Suresh, to interrupt you there, but I just want to get that to him. So back to you, sir.
Yeah, well, so don't have to be sorry. This is definitely something very good. I do know that a few folks, handful of folks have to drop off for their other appointments. Probably I can share that with them as well later.
Excellent.
Okay, so coaches, does anyone have any questions about and beyond what we have been hearing, listening from Stephen? If not, while you're thinking about your questions, wanted to kind of ask you, Alison, if there's anything that you want to add to.
No, thank you, Suresh. No, just a big thank you to Stephen for his time, and thanks to everyone for giving up some time on their Saturday. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Feeling inspired to change your lifestyle, your diet, and all the other advice that Stephen, not become multitaskers. I've just noticed myself as I'm older, I used to pride myself on being a bit of a multitasker. I used to joke about it with all the guys at work, but now really it's only one thing at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Particularly on important stuff.
Mm.
So there have been a lot of takeaways coaches have been sharing, Stephen. So James and I will probably pull them together a little later. But interestingly, I just wanted to highlight one most common thing that a lot of people have been talking about. Many times I saw those coming out in the chat is multitasking. So it seems to be the winning topic for the day that all of us have been multitasking. And then you said it very well about this is all about cognitive multitasking. That's
Right.
where we kind of train ourselves. And something that I used to do as a technical technology person from the angle of multi-threaded multitasking as a technical term, even the CPUs don't do multitasking, so to speak. They cycle steal. At a point in time, they do only one thing. And that's what I think you very much brought that aspect of cognitive multitasking. Yeah. It was very good.
Thank you. The brain's a lot like your web browser. If you've got 6 or 7 tabs up there, you can only look at one of them at a time. So if you want to go back and forth between various tabs on your browser, that's multitasking from a brain standpoint. But again, the brain can only focus on one of those. You can only focus on one tab at a time.
Yeah. Thank you. James, you've been smiling. Any questions or any insights? Because I know you've not been multitasking.
No, I haven't, not indeed. And it's a bit noisy here, but for sure, Stephen, thank you very much for your time. I love the simple way that you brought it across. And I think, judging from the chat, a lot of people have got very similar takeaways. I think the reduced sugar is something I've been telling myself for a long time, but certainly get more sleep and be more active, not sitting still. And obviously the multitasking is something that I know I do and badly. So thank you for your time, sir. It's good to see you again.
My pleasure. And when I come to Singapore next, we'll all get together for some chili crab.
Yep.
Well, I can add pepper into the chili crab as well. Sorry.
Black pepper crab as well.
Yeah.
Black pepper crab as well.
Yeah, well, so probably one last time. Coaches, any other questions that you want to bring up here? Okay, if not, thanks for sparing your time on a Saturday morning. And again, I'm just echoing what James said, Stephen. Thank you very much. Really putting this together for us.
Do we want the photo?
Yeah. I'll get that. I got that.
Okay.
And with respect to the recording, I'm going to stop the recording right now. And with your permission, I'll probably, if you allow us, I'll probably post it somewhere and share with other people who could not make it today. Yeah.
I have no problem with that.